Weiss, CLNS Radio. Isaiah, is this the toughest loss you've had to endure so far?
Yes. It was very emotional for me, just because we gave it our all. I mean, we never put our head down, and like I said, this group of guys is something special, and I played. I mean, I gave it my all, so that's why it hurts that much more. I wish I could have done more, but it just happened to be like that, so it is tough on me, though.
We learned a lot through this playoff series, but one of the things that I learned is we've got to get better. And you know what? That starts with me. I've got to get better. And then, you know, I think each of our players will look at that accountably as well, and we're all going to be better the next time we take the court.
Like I just told Isaiah, we just got to keep chipping at it and keep getting better. Of course, it's going to be only one team to have a successful year, and that's when you hold a trophy up. So until we do that, it's not a successful season. But we're going to keep building and keep working. That's all I got to say about it.
The Celtics season is over. They lose 104-92 in Game 6 of the first round versus the Atlanta Hawks. We're going to talk about this game, and then we're going to come back for part 2. We're going to talk about the season. So welcome to the final Garden Report of the year on CLNS Radio and Celtics Blog.
Yes, I'm the boss.
Welcome to our final episode of the Garden Report post-game show for this playoff run as the Celtics season ends in what was initially a horrific fashion and then ended up being a kind of impressive comeback, I guess, in the end. So I'm joined by Kevin O'Connor of Celtics Blog and Sam Packard of WEEI. I'm Jared Weiss of CLNS Radio. We're going to talk about two things here. First part, we're going to talk about this game in this series. Second part, we're going to talk about this season. So first off, the Celtics are knocked down when they lose Avery Bradley. Losing Avery Bradley was something that was an incredible handicap for this series and made it an incredible challenge for the Celtics to try to win. And it was really revealed tonight as the Celtics did not have the outside shooting that he provides and just quite enough of that versatile defense that they need, Sam.
Yeah, you really saw it in games 5 and 6 where the Hawks would blitz Isaiah Thomas and he'd pass it away. He'd make the right pass, and the Celtics would have a 4-on-3 opportunity, and if they had a good shooter or someone like Avery Bradley where they could swing it to, they'd be more of a lethal offense. But because they didn't really have anyone who was a threat from deep, you could see those three Hawks players kind of sink in and force the Celtics to try to do something around that, and they really couldn't tonight. When you're relying on Evan Turner and Marcus Smart to be kind of reliable knockdown three-point shooters, you're going to lose basketball games.
Yeah, and Jay Crowder not being in the game for the Celtics as well. He's played in the game, but essentially at 2 for 11, I think, tonight. He was a non-factor on the offensive end of the floor, and there's not enough can be said about the impact Crowder made all season long, stretching the floor before his second high ankle sprain, his ability to drive closeouts. The Celtics really lacked that in this series, which would have, I think, been a significant boost on the offensive end.
And Kelly Olynyk being hurt for the kind of pick and pop stuff like that, just injuries piled up, and the Celtics really ran out of gas.
You don't want to blame the injuries, but at the same time,
no, I'm blaming them.
They all happen at the same
not?
time, and they played a huge role in this series, ending at 6 and not 7.
I mean, the three key outside shooters for this team that are off the ball were all hurt. And Jonas Jerebko stepped into that role, and he really had a tremendous series. And I think he was the one guy in this series that really game in and game out elevated the team. It was the one guy that I think just had that could really be proud of what they did. Isaiah Thomas, obviously, there's so much pressure on him that you can't blame him for the loss. He made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I really hammered him after Game 5 because I thought he played terrible defense during those huge runs that the Hawks went on. But overall, the Hawks, like the Cleveland, the only other team they played in the playoffs during this era, they figured out that they could double Isaiah towards the later end of the series as the rest of the team was a little worn down. And the Celtics don't really respond that well to him being trapped throughout the game. Beginning of Game 5, they did a pretty decent job. Tonight, it was mostly guys having to come back and bail him out. They couldn't trap Isaiah Thomas, and then the Celtics couldn't really continue to run a play out of that. They really just needed to reset the ball, and that really slowed the pace down for them. And even though they took 20 more shots than the Hawks shot 15% better and really were shooting 20% better until the Celtics went on that big run.
Yeah, I mean, with Isaiah Thomas, he's obviously the Celtics' best player, right? And he is a significant reason why they won as many games as they did this year. but I think it really illustrates how much they need another guy. Because as good as Isaiah is, he can't handle the load all by himself as a 5'8", 5'9" point guard. He needs help, and we'll talk about that more in part 2, what they can do, what they should do. But I think this series and last year versus Cleveland illustrates, if anything, just how much they need more than what they currently have now.
So the Celtics twice in the last 30 years in the playoffs have taken 23s and shot worse than 20%. They would have been there tonight, but they had a few threes in the end, and they finished with 22%. But this was a team
garbage time.
Yeah, and those were, I mean, that was like the big comeback where like you're going to make a bunch of plays. Yep. They hit the threes, which was great. Jay Crowder hit a few, which kind of came out of nowhere to close it out. But was there something that the Celtics should have done or could have done differently that would have turned the tables in the series, or was this just really an amalgamation of how things were going to have to play out with the disadvantage that they had? Sam, we'll go to you first.
I think if they maybe had more practice times, they may had more like counters or more better reacting to the doubles, but really I didn't see, like, they made the right basketball plays. They just a lot of the times came down to shot making, and that's kind of, I feel like after every Garden report where they had a loss, we said, well, they didn't make their shots tonight. And
that's how it always is.
That's how it always is. If they just don't have enough outside shot making, they're not going to win a lot of games. That's why they need to improve that in the offseason. And I think it's going to be the main skill they target. But we'll talk about that in part 2.
Sam's 100% right. But at the same time, I think Brad was a little bit slow to pull Sullinger from the starting lineup. Jonas Jerebko should have been in there game 2, in my opinion. I think Sullinger should have been probably a DNP tonight and last game, and probably the game before that. You don't want to, it's not blaming Sullinger, but this just wasn't the series for him in terms of matchups.
At the same time, though, like, Brad's like a loyal person, and if you bench Sullinger in game 2, you may lose him for the rest of the series.
Which they did.
So, I mean, you can argue that in hindsight, but I feel like there's a certain kind of loyalty of the players or faith that they're going to perform eventually. So if you completely go away from them, you have risk the chance of losing them. I agree that he could have started Jerebko earlier, but there's something to be said of just kind of sticking with what you have and trying to move forward with that.
I think you're right, but at the same time, you know, if the Celtics had won this series, Sullinger would have been an asset against Cleveland next round, so his time would have come, whereas maybe Zeller's time would have been now, or Jonas's time would have been a little bit earlier than it was. But it's all what ifs, and it's really hard to know what would have happened.
Well, it's kind of every playoff series, a coach, if they're down, they always have to deal with that. There's always, you can probably look across the league and find the same thing, that some important rotation player that you were expecting to be better for you eventually gets pulled from the rotation. And frankly, I thought after game 1, I wanted to see Jerebko coming out there for game 2 more. And frankly, over the last couple, I'd say the last 2 games, I thought Sullinger played too many minutes. I mean, tonight, he played 6.5, and I already thought that was too many because he played, he had like 2 minutes at the beginning where he was like looking okay. And then the Hawks just started putting him kind of isolated between 2 players on the weak side, and he was just stuck in the middle. They ran around him. They scored. They had like 8 points in a row, I think, just going really attacking Sullinger. And Stevens could have pulled the plug a little bit earlier. He held out a little too long. And you are absolutely right that a coach just has to have faith in his players. But at a certain point, I feel like you've kind of waited for things to come around long enough, and it just didn't happen. They really dealt with that with Sullinger already, where they invested so much. They invested 3 years into letting him develop a reliable three-point shot, and it just hasn't happened. And the team is still really going through this debate coming up to the last game of when do we have him shoot a 3, when do we have him shoot a long 2? And at a certain point, they had to cut bait, and they did it at the end of the season, and they really didn't do it quite quickly enough with Jared.
But it's easy to harp on, I think, that Jared Sullinger's crappy 6 minutes, but if he played...
It's not the reason why
if he played a crappy 3 minutes, they still would have lost by 12. So I think it's like, yes, there's like nitpicks you can decide, but the fact of the matter is they just ran up against a much more talented Atlanta Hawks team.
A much healthier team as well.
A much healthier team, and a team that is streaky and is a very good shooting team, and we saw when they can go on runs, especially when the Celtics are not making shots and they have a bunch of opportunities in transition, they're going to lose the basketball game. Everything's kind of connected, so as much as you can point to kind of those adjustments, I think Stevens in-game is pretty good at working with his rotation, so if he's not have the right adjustment at the start of the game, I think he's normally figured it out by the 4th quarter.
And one last note on kind of the injuries. I think one thing that's kind of gone overlooked is Isaiah Thomas's left wrist hand injury. He's used his right a lot more the past 2 weeks, and he's missed a lot of his lefty layups. I think early in the series, he had a couple like wide open layup misses. I mean, where he was lightly contested and he just clanked it off the backboard. And
Game 2, he missed every shot he took.
Missed a lot of them.
Wide open bunnies, yeah.
And I mean, I wonder, he's had 2 surgeries on that wrist. I wonder if it was hurting him more than he was letting on. I mean, maybe that's something he has another operation on this summer. Who really knows?
We'll find out.
But I think it was more of a problem in the series than people think, and that really affected his ability to finish at the rim.
We'll find out when they announce his 3rd surgery in June.
Who knows?
Might happen.
You hope not.
Kelly
for the
Olynyk
Celtics.
probably. I think we got an injury announcement
Yeah.
coming for him, a
We'll
surgery
see.
announcement. Jared Solinger, who knows? We're going to go to part 2. We're going to talk about all those things here. But quickly, how do you think the Hawks fare against Cleveland? They look like a team that's ready to go up against Cleveland and take them deep.
Nope. Cleveland has Kyrie Irving and LeBron James. They're not going to lose.
And Kevin Love.
And Kevin Love.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take Cleveland in the series, probably in 5 or 6. I like Atlanta a lot, but I think Cleveland.
I think 6
I
is pretty
think the
neat.
fact
That's kind of what I was thinking,
the
too.
fact that we saw Atlanta, I feel like Atlanta gave away games 3 and 4.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Celtics had no business really winning those, and I think Atlanta lacks kind of the mental toughness. I know they eventually pulled it out, but made some stupid plays and kind of gave the game away. Schroeder is out to lunch. I'm done with him.
I love Dennis Schroeder. Very quickly, 1 minute more. Kevin, let's start with you. Can we hand out some awards in this series? Who's your MVP of this series?
MVP for everybody or just the Celtics?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Screw the Celtics.
Paul Millsap might be a surprise, but I thought his defense was spectacular.
It's not a surprise. He's
I mean,
the biggest star of the team.
If you throw away that 45-point game, I think people would say, oh, he stunk, which he did offensively, but his defense was
Just the first 2 games.
spectacular.
Yeah.
I thought he was a stud on defense, and it's really amazing to see how far he's come as a player. And I think he blocked at least 3 or 4 of Isaiah Thomas's shots at the
4
rim.
tonight.
4 tonight.
He had 4 in Game 4.
He
He's been
was
incredible.
really special on the defensive end of the floor,
Really one of the best players in the NBA now.
especially in the playoffs.
Do you have a different?
I'm trying to think of someone different, and
Well,
I
you
got.
can look over here. If
No,
you
I
want.
know all the players. I got nothing.
I mean,
so
Kurt Bazemore, maybe.
Kurt Bazemore, yeah.
Favorite name in the NBA. I mean, Jeff Teague was great. Kyle Korver was great, but Paul Millsap is the guy.
Yeah.
He's the best player on both ends. Really, I mean, despite including the 45-point game, I still think it was his defense that is what made him so great for this team. Because Al Horford kind of went up and down there in the middle of the series. He had a great night to finish it tonight, but Paul was just consistently elite defensively. Really, he was the reason why the Hawks were able to collapse that paint. I mean, he just really did it. He covered the ground. He probably must have contested like 40 shots a game. Really one of the best performances across the NBA in the first round. So we'll be back for part 2 with another long one where we just go deep into what's going to happen over the next couple months. So be right back on this playlist here on the Garden Report on CLNS Radio and Celtics Blog.
It sucks to lose like this. You know, it's not fun. But, you know, like I said, all credit to Atlanta. They played better than us today. You know, we got to learn from this and be better than we were today.
It's tough, you know what I'm saying? It's definitely tough. Nobody wants to, you know, dip out, you know, first round. Credit to the Hawks. They played great. They executed well, and they did a great job.
Toughest end of the season. It's been a very successful season as a group. Does this defeat, this elimination, take the luster off the season itself?
I mean, season and playoffs are 2 different things, you know what I'm saying? Once again, it's tough. You know, it's a horrible way to end, you know, considering, you know, what we were able to accomplish throughout the season. You know, once again, right now, everything is tough, but, you know, when you sit down and you think about it, you know, you're just going to have to bounce back somehow, and that's it.